Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly Pulse Check. We're taking a look at what's happened in the news around automation and AI. And Michael, the first article I think was the best. We're going to cover three, but this one was absolutely the most intriguing. It comes from a publication called The Hill, as in Capitol Hill. And the title of the article is The Solution to Automation Fears, Employee Ownership. You know, we've had a lot of dialogue recently about the perpetual struggle between workers impacted by automation and the inevitability of change through technology innovation. The longshoremen, one of the more recent examples, as they went on strike to protest automation. So what did you think about this author's idea on how to solve this?
Well, I thought it was interesting. And I think from a broad perspective, makes a lot of sense, but probably be very difficult to implement for a number of different reasons. So their solution to this threatening action by automation, like we saw with the longshoremen and several others, is by allowing ownership of the organization by the employees who would be affected. So they would feel a desire, I guess, to make their organization be as efficient and profitable as possible, which I think from a baseline makes the most sense. I mean, if you're in an organization and you feel invested in it in terms of your job time, but also in terms of the fact that I'm going to maybe reap some benefits by being more profitable, you're likely going to be putting more effort into that job and maybe looking towards how I can be more strategic with the work I'm doing and the work we're doing is in general. So I agree with that. The tough part about that, in all honesty, is that if you offer employees ownership, at what level do you offer that ownership? So if you take a public company, name any one of the S&P 500 public companies, likely any of the employees could have shares in their 401k or just their trading accounts or whatever brokerage accounts that they have ownership of that company. You know, they have 5 shares and each of those shares is worth $50 and now they're owners of the company. You and 500 million other shareholders are owners of that company. Does that really give you that same kind of investment or that feel that if the company's profitable, I'm going to make some money off of it, right?
Probably
Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah. So I think there has to be a different way of approaching it. So I think for maybe some SMB companies, you have these smaller, mid-sized companies where they have the capability of perhaps having the large share holder provide shares out to his employees after some vesting periods. They can be owner. That might be beneficial for them to feel a part of the company. But the difficulty is then, as we've seen with any kind of small business, like, well, I've given, however many shares, whatever that looks like, to one of my employees. What happens when they transition jobs? Now they're not part of the company. This isn't a publicly traded company. Now they own the company. They have a vote in what happens, even though they're no longer here, and they're benefiting from things that, because it's not as widely available and distributed amongst many people. So their vote could actually cause issues, especially if you had a number of people who had to get laid off in a specific part of the organization. Now you can stretch this out and think ownership may not be a great idea if you give away the ownership and your employees turn against the main shareholder. So which is what we're seeing basically from a longshoreman strike action. They're not owners, but they're turning against management, right, and causing issues for the operation of the company. So I don't think it changes the base level, which is I'm afraid for my job. That part, I think, needs to be addressed in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes sense on paper, make sure automation is not happening to them, it's happening for them. They have a vested interest in seeing the company perform better and they'll benefit because they have ownership. But you're right. It also, how many of these company owners are willing to give up ownership to their employees to mitigate the threat of a strike, for example, like the longshoremen went through to protest automation. Time will tell.
It has to be significant ownership too, because owning 3 shares, where maybe your profit sharing would be 8 cents a year, is not enough to make you feel part of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I did like one quote from the article. It says, "It is simple but foolhardy to require explicitly that employers eschew automation. It is doubtful that any industrial sector will be completely untouched by the advancement of automation and AI." Wow, there's a lot of punch to that statement, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. Especially eschew. That's a very popular word in my lexicon. It's always good to be able to say eschew. It sounds like, Gesundheit. Article number 2 comes from Forbes. It's titled "Powering QA with AI, Embracing Creativity in Automated Testing." This takes me back to the late 80s. I'm fresh out of school. I'm going to work for the management consulting division of Arthur Andersen, and they teach me how to COBOL 2 program. And I remember the pain and suffering that went along with preparing test case scenarios and test data and predicted results. So as I read this article, I was like, wow, Gen AI could have been a major boost in that territory. Too bad it wasn't around at that time. What are your thoughts on this article, Michael? I know you're a big tester, a test enthusiast.
I don't know if I'm a test enthusiast, but I have done it like you in my past life. And it certainly is something that folks who are testers have to think creatively, because when designers put together their application, there's expectations of how users are going to interface with it and use it. And when test cases come along that the designers and the developers didn't think about, they get upset, actually. But that's what the QA tester's job is to break the software before it goes out into public and have the users break the product. So I think it's interesting applying the AI creativity, because of course I'd click in just general area because that's where the button is, but having AI click in different areas of the application or drag things over or do things differently, that really does add some more, again, speed testing kind of thing, because AI can do things so much more quickly. And so they can apply test cases in bizarre ways that maybe will uncover some unique use cases that weren't thought about before. Like, if a user does this, and this is what happens and how it breaks. And we never thought that could happen, but now I see how it could possibly happen. So let's put some protection into the software so it doesn't happen when it goes out into the public or into a general release.
Yeah, most people don't typically put creativity and testing together, but it really does. It really does.
If you talk with any QA engineers, you will know they're extremely creative.
I will say that I've had the experience of talking with a real customer about this particular use case for Gen AI. So it has come up already with one of our customers, and they see the benefit because they have to involve a significant amount of human personnel to go and build scenarios. And each time there's a major change to the system they're using, they have to do it. It's a real time-consuming, very tedious activity. The article also says that this is leading us to the future of autonomous testing. What do you think about that, Michael?
Autonomous testing, to me, indicates that there's some level of guardrails you could put around whatever that testing is to indicate to a specific into a use case, which may or may not be true. You may have that capability in back testing or over testing when you've released a new feature in another part of the application that goes through and back tests all of the application. I can understand that because it can be autonomous in that regard. It doesn't have to run the same tests that it did in the past, but it has to do them in the same screen, for example, where here there's only so many inputs there. They can change the data that goes in there. They can change the output that they're looking for, that sort of thing. But, if I just gave it a random application, they wouldn't have any purpose behind it to understand what it was testing or what a good use case looks like or what a bad use case looks like. So to me, autonomous testing is probably best within guardrails. So we don't have to maybe code specific test cases, but we code the guardrails around this screen or this use case so that it can run through scenarios that may be different every time, but not necessarily coded directly for that particular application.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like another possible way that agentic AI can play a role in certain areas. If you train it to, every time there's a new release of software or some change in the base code, can you teach it to recognize that and go and figure out a way to test it, make sure there's nothing obvious that it broke by the change. So, interesting.
When you talk about agile stuff, where they have agile development, multiple releases in a day potentially, and you can have this kind of back testing happening simultaneously and continually. It's a good application for it for sure.
Right. Our third article comes to us from Fast Company, and it's titled "How a New Trump Administration Will Treat the Budding AI Industry." Now, we've talked a lot about AI regulation and what is happening or what is not happening. There's a lot of speculation that the new presidential administration that's coming in will greatly reduce the amount of government oversight of AI. So going in the opposite direction of what we've been seeing, happen, although it's happening faster in EMEA and other places. So what do you think about what this article has to say? It's certainly a hot topic.
Yeah, there are two main points that I see in this article. One of them is on the deregulation aspect of it. And certainly the Trump administration has indicated that they are going to be doing more deregulation in other industries. So that trend, I think, would make sense in terms of the way they're approaching it. Whether it makes sense generally, you've got two houses here. One says, if we deregulate, that means that we'll have innovation happen more quickly. We can develop more unique and interesting tools that can support our civilization moving forward. The second house, which I believe the Europeans have taken, is we're going to clamp down on AI regulations and make sure that AI moves much more slowly so that humans can adapt and adopt to the changes that are coming in a way that won't overwhelm us. Because right now we're in massive change mode. I mean, daily we're having interesting new things come out. So it's difficult for people to assimilate them. If you regulate heavily, you can make sure that you're moving much more slowly because there's a lot more regulation and a lot more hurdles you have to go through to ensure safety and governance and all the other pieces. However, if you over-regulate, if you tighten that screw too tight, then it basically shuts off the flow and people will stop developing because they're unable to move forward and comply with the regulation. So I think there's a healthy balance in there somewhere between deregulation completely Wild West and over-regulation, clamp it down. I think there's a healthy balance somewhere in the middle where there should be some kind of regulations, but they should be loose enough to be able to allow innovation to happen while controlled enough not to allow these innovations to cause havoc.
Right.
The second part of the article, which I thought was also very interesting, sort of honed in on AI's use within various parts of the government, specifically in military and defense. And up till now, there have been within various parts of the OpenAI's governance model internally, they're saying we won't allow defense and military to leverage OpenAI, and they've actually backed that off, indicating that you can use our product, but not for direct killing or destruction. So that's how they're backing that off. And then we start looking at Meta, which says, hey, we're just going to let the government agencies, leverage our open source model here, however they want to use it. And so that, again, opens that even further, the door even further. when you start applying it to the last part of the article, which talks about some of the robotic activities, where we've seen a whole bunch of this now, where you have these humanoid robots that are washing dishes, putting things away at a factory, implementing things and whatnot. So that's interesting. But now we start applying a couple different technologies where you have maybe generative AI at the edge, leveraging an open source model from Meta that's now activated within the core circuitry of one of these robots that now that has the capabilities of saying, I'm going to go beyond just doing helper, but now I can actually do the kill and destruction mode. Now you start talking about, okay, this is getting to the point where maybe that regulation part needs to come into play. But that's just my own personal experience, knowing that if we see any kind of automated anything when it comes to the battlefield, it should have a person behind it somewhere to make the right decision, because sensors aren't always accurate or can be overwhelmed. And the last thing we need is to have an overwhelmed sensor cause World War 27, right?
Yeah.
So
you remember OpenAI recently changed to a for-profit company. I think when they did that, it took them a millisecond to figure out that they need to tap into those trillions of dollars being spent.
It's amazing how that works.
The defense of our country. So, it's not surprising they went in that direction.
Yeah.
The article, is using some anecdotal, situations or conversations or comments from Trump and Vance even to argue that we're going to go into a less regulated environment. But probably the biggest statement of all, which it also talks about, is the fact that Elon Musk has been chosen as a cabinet member. So we're probably, any way you slice it, it looks like we're going into a looser, more innovation kind of centric world of AI development. Let's hope there's still some common sense and some guardrails, both federally as well as locally or at the state level, that can mitigate some of the risks that are out there. But it is interesting.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. That's all we have time for today on the Pulse Check. Remember, we publish another podcast every week with an incredible guest. So check that out. And we will see you next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.